Despite the need to protect our own lives, the lives of our allies, and the need to deter terrorist acts, the U.S. needs to put a cap on the amount of destructive power that can be retained in any single nuclear bomb. I'm going to follow my assertion with claim that we have never found a practical application for the use of such large-scale weapons as a hydrogen bomb because they're so destructive. Public approval ratings regarding expenditures, manufacturing, and use of nuclear weapons are substantially low. As well as in limiting the power of nuclear weapons, we set a good example for other countries to follow. In regards to finding a practical application, just a note, on the case of September 11th, we were not able to deter terrorists, obviously, from attacking us, let alone use those weapons against them for retaliation. And background info regarding the nuclear weapons is at first, the U.S. used nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And after that, Stalin launched his own nuclear construction project in the Soviet Union. So August 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tested their first bomb produced from the project that Stalin set up. President Truman said that the U.S. was losing that race, so he said that we needed to build a hydrogen bomb, which was even more powerful using nuclear fusion, which is the power used in the sun. The new device was tested by the U.S. in 1952 and proved to be 1,000 times more powerful than the bombs we dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And to put this in scale, the bomb could have engulfed the entire island of Manhattan. Or another way to put it is that the bombs we dropped in Japan were about 20,000 sticks of dynamite. These new bombs accounted to about 10 million sticks of dynamite. With this stated, we have no practical application for all of this power to be used in one nuclear weapon. Following the suit in the arms race, the Soviet Union developed their own hydrogen bomb, and they produced thousands, they successfully tested theirs in 1955, 3 years after the U.S. had this giant bomb. And similarly, Great Britain and many other countries started to produce thousands of smaller-scale nuclear devices. So now we have tons of countries with these ridiculously destructive weapons. Very potentially dangerous situation. By virtue of the American voters, in regards to the approval ratings of the nuclear weapons, we need to tone down, or in some opinions, even rid humanity of these weapons. In a public opinion poll by Nuclear Files, which is an advocate for the Project for Nuclear HP's Foundation, they found 91% of young voters, just like us, 18 to 24, would feel safer if they knew that no country possessed any nuclear weapons. Additionally, 77% of all Americans, that's all age groups, all voters, are in favor of eliminating all nuclear weapons, which, interestingly enough, is not skewed towards any particular party. It's about half and half between Democrats and Republicans, at least. In limiting the power of the nuclear weapons and setting a good example for other countries to follow is very important, because other countries have and will continue to mirror the excuses for the possession of our excessive military force. One of the biggest arguments is that we keep the weapons on hand for our own protection, and it's only too easy for any other country to counter with the same argument in the interest of their own safety, which makes sense. To tell these countries that it's not their right to possess them sets the precedent that we're somehow a better country and deserve more power to dictate matters in the world, which is somewhat skewed and very skewed, and has led to hostile attitudes and required us to use military force to use this argument of our superiority. So I hope you'll agree with me that the strength and damage potential of today's nuclear weapons is far too great to be handled by any one political faction. And an agreement should be sought to limit the destructive power of these bombs, capping them at energy levels no greater than those used during the Second World War, which is the only practical application we've ever found for them. Should we fail to adhere to these strict guidelines, the world may literally come to the end in the blink of an eye.
All right, well, the proposition's identified and there's a good structure set up. You signpost it as you go through it. You need better argument on that first point. The notion that terrorists weren't deterred by nuclear weapons seems to ignore the origination of the nuclear proliferation process. So I think you have to put it in a different context. There's no discussion of the history of nuclear war other than the development of the weapons. We don't get a discussion of Soviet-American nuclear policy and whether it kept the peace in Europe, whether it prevented invasions, whether it caused Vietnam to occur and expand, whether it prevented further Vietnams. We don't get any discussion about other nations that have proliferated and the instability that's created by those kinds of things. We just get general information about the historical development of the weapons, and that's the main justification that's used for the nuclear weapons, is the deterrence issue and the military applications on those things. And there's a lot of information out there that where people argue that this has been a substantial part of the deterrent. Now, whether or not we need such a deterrent anymore, I think there's a good argument on that, but you never really address that issue. The claim that says that we set examples, for instance, and that other people should follow those examples, what you need is some information about the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, how the U.S.'s actions have undermined the legitimacy of that treaty or have allowed people to use that treaty as a justification for proliferating despite them being signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. We're not getting context on this. We're just getting a general statement on it. I warned against too much dependence on public opinion as evidence for issues of fact here. I think this is one of those places where you need a little bit more expert opinion. You know, everybody feels safer without the nuclear weapons. I know I'd feel safer if nobody else had the nuclear weapons. You know, so if you have that survey, yeah, of course people would feel safer in that particular context. On the other hand, has it prevented widespread wars such as we had in the first part of the century? That's one of the big arguments that gets made. We get localized wars, they stay very compact, and they don't turn into world wars because of the very threat of nuclear annihilation. And so I think that's one of the context arguments that gets ignored here. All right, thank you.